Hey guys, it's Jeef here, and today I'm going to teach you guys everything you need to know about positioning. We'll be discussing positioning at all stages of the game, as well as default positioning and how to make adjustments based off your opponent. First, why is positioning so important? Positioning in Battlegrounds is one of the main things you actually have agency over, and good positioning may result in a significant edge over your opponents. Sometimes Bob gives you bad rolls or bad discoveries, but if you simply just outposition your opponent, you might still be able to win your fights. Positioning minions such as Thrasher or Foreper will drastically change depending on your matchup, and you don't want these minions running into something random. This video is going to be split into two chapters. 1. Positioning in the early and mid game, and 2. Positioning in the end game. Let's get straight into it. Chapter 1. Positioning early and mid game. The golden rule for positioning turns 1 through 7 is putting your highest attack units first and your lowest attack units last. Most of you guys probably know this, but may not understand why. Early game is all about getting value trades. Value trades are trades that can kill an opposing minion while surviving. A 4-5 can value trade a 3-4, a 3-6 can value trade a 3-3, a 3-2 Divine Shield can value trade a 5-2. In the early game, you don't have to worry about Venomous or Cleaves at all, so all that matters is that you're getting as many value trades as possible. By putting your highest attack unit first, you're allowing it to attack and most certainly value trade a unit on your opponent's board. Putting a small 2-1 in first, for instance, will likely just cause it to die, where it could possibly trade into a damaged minion or another small minion if it's positioned later. Aside from positioning from highest to lowest attack, high MR players will commonly also consider the taunt of your opponent in the early game. If your opponent is showing Undead or stayed on 1 with Undeads in, they'll likely have the card Risen Rider. Against Risen Rider, it's best to put your 2-5 or 1-4 stat line in the front to kill it for free, and you definitely want to delay units such as 5-2 Mercules if you have one. Once again, it's all about getting those value trades, and Mercules definitely can't value trade a Risen Rider. A hero showing mechs on turn 1 right now is guaranteed to have a Noatron, and with Mukla in the lobby or any hero power that can scale it basically, it's probably going to be a pretty big Divine Shield taunt. Versus this, you must put your smallest unit up front or else you're going to risk having your biggest unit run into the Divine Shield taunt and taking a ton of damage for no reason. These are a couple of meta-specific examples, and the exact taunts to play around will definitely change from meta to meta. However, the core concepts remain, and you'd really want to adapt to common early game taunts as they're added into the game. The last thing I have to cover in this section is positioning your backline units. If you have units you need to protect, such as Avenge units or maybe Hummingbird, Titus, etc., you need to ensure that they'll get the most value as possible. What are the implications of that? Put the minions that summon other minions as early as possible. Here's why. The more units you have on your board at any point, the less likely your backline units is to get sniped. Thus, you want as many units on your board at all times. Obviously, this doesn't mean you should lose any summons. If you have a Mana Saber with a Hummingbird, obviously you shouldn't put your Mana Saber position 1. But you should definitely put it position 2 after your position 1 unit dies. Here's an example of a positioning that is wrong, and to fix it, you need to put Surat position 1 so it can die and free up board space for the 2 couplings. Make sense? Keep in mind this is positioning from turns 1 through turn 7, and positioning probably isn't going to impact your game that much, but still nice to know the intricacies. Let's get into some of the really impactful stuff, which is positioning in the late game. Chapter 2. Late game positioning. Late game positioning will be split into two parts, positioning with and without information, both equally as important. Positioning without information is mainly about default positioning, something very important to get right. Imagine you just finished a crazy APM turn and you have like 2 seconds left for positioning, or you're maybe facing someone you've never faced before, showing mixed minions, you just don't have anything to go off of. This is when you should employ default positioning, which is basically a positioning that can't really go wrong against most boards. I should note that this default positioning applies to most builds, but some of the combo builds require extremely precise positioning, and you probably shouldn't go ahead and apply your default positioning to these combo builds. Anyways, what actually is default positioning? The first thing about default positioning is a bumper. This is the worst statted unit on your board that literally never trades into anything. Your Nala, your Bran, your Theatar, your Selfless Hero, these are or were common bumpers. Sometimes this isn't a minion you want to be fighting, but you have to keep it on your board because it's the only way you can scale. Bumpers should always go first in default positioning. This way you can counter maybe a Matador proc, you can bump off a shield on a Divine Shield taunt, giving a roll to an otherwise useless minion. Your biggest unit should also always go second in default positioning, but this is only the case currently and not always. There was once a time where Amalgadons and Mantiqueens were extremely common taunts, and versus these cards you actually want to delay your biggest minion a lot so it doesn't run into their poison. However, this meta there's not a lot of taunted poison units, the only one really being taunted Grimscale, which isn't really popular. So it's pretty safe to just have your biggest unit second and have the most chance at value trading. Default positioning also requires 1 taunt 7s. This is the most effective against cleave and there's not really a harm playing around it. If you have a second taunt, then it depends how big your taunts are. If both taunts are small, then you should put them next to each other because you don't really care if both of them just gets cleaved. However, if you have 1 or 2 big taunts, then you really need to put your taunts position 5 and position 7 because you actually do care if your big taunts gets cleaved and you want to try to either have their cleave run into your big taunt or have their cleave nothing at all. If you have 3 taunts, I tend to put your third taunt position 1. That way their cleave doesn't get that much value if it cleaves your position 1. But try not to have 3 taunts in a cleave lobby to begin with. Cleave Protect is basically putting your unit that you don't really care about next to your taunt, so you don't really care if it gets cleaved. And it's a good habit to do so while default positioning. Doing default positioning every single round is decent to get started, but as you climb higher and higher, you can do better with the limited information you're given. And to be the very best, you're going to have to make specific adjustments based on the tribe that your opponent is playing. Just to be clear, this is still under the default positioning section, and you have not played this particular opponent recently. I tend to make adjustments according to the common minions that you're going to see in this tribe that they're showing. Here are some examples. You can expect a ton of Venomous from Murlocs, so you should adjust to this by putting your biggest unit last and trying to get rid of all their Venomous with tokens and mid-sized units. Pirates and Quillboars don't usually have a Divine Shield taunt, but they commonly have a cleave, so cleave protecting is much more important than bumping against these tribes. Against Beasts and Undead, it's important that you don't buff because you need as many chances to snipe their backline units as possible. These are the current adjustments you should be making, but remember, as the minion pool changes, there will be other adjustments you need to make. If Law's Elemental suddenly becomes OP and stays on every single elemental board, well, guess what you'll have to play around. Or if Amalgadon and Mantiqueen are just reintroduced back into the game, then be prepared to play around those as well. The second thing I have to cover is positioning with information. If you know your opponent's board from a previous fight, how can you capitalize on that? The first thing you must look at is what taunt they have. Let's say you know your Naga opponent has a 30-30 glow scale. Leading Bramble Witch is pretty good, but you know what's even better? Leading your biggest unit and value trading it. If you're able to value trade your opponent's taunt, you should definitely do that in the late game. That way, you save your Bramble Witch or Venomous hit on a higher impact target while securing the 2-for-1 with your biggest unit. This will massively swing the fight in your favor. Make sure the 30-30 glow scale won't be scaled up though and you don't end up value trading yourself. A second tip on positioning with information is to optimize your counter and tech cards. A position 1 Sindora might seem obvious against an undead opponent, but it can be correct to delay it as well to take away Reborn from key units that aren't taunted which is most commonly Murgle right now. And that leads us to our final tip, which is probably the most valuable tip of them all. And it's so valuable, every Highmar player does this without thinking. The tip is to simulate the fight in your head. Simulate it with you attacking first, simulate it with them attacking first, and see if you're happy with the outcome. If you're not, try another positioning and see if it does on average better. Those were some extremely general statements, so it's more productive to show you guys some examples. I'm just going to quickly work through an example here. This example is actually from one of my previous videos called Every Decision Explained by Rank 1 or something. And here, right off the bat, we can see our last opponent's board. This is thanks to, of course, HS Replay Tracker. And a lot of you guys keep on asking where I get this tracker from. So the download link will just be in the description. Anyways, right off the bat, throughout the video, we learned what to look for when you're scouting your previous opponent. So here, the immediate thing that I look for is the Taunted Belcher, very important, and the 2 cleaves. So how do I best position around Taunted Belcher and two cleaves? We're just gonna do our best and simulate the fight kind of through our heads. So if you guys didn't remember, the cleaves kind of have 100 HP, so they will indeed value trade the bookie. So first we need to decide our leading unit. That's the most important thing. What makes the most sense as the leading unit? Okay, so the straight shot, as we stated before, the straight shot needs to be delayed because he has 2 Murgles on his board, and straight shot is probably the most effective way to deal with Murgle on this board. So straight shot definitely needs to be position 2 or 3. We have the Rapscallion recruiters. I could put the Rapscallion recruiter first, but then you lose a bunch of value, especially because I have the Ferrex, and Ferrex is Avenge 3 or Avenge 4, give a minion Divine Shield. So I do want full value off the Rapscallion recruiters. The bookie positioning, so bookie needs to be later on because he has 2 Murgles and a Belcher. I don't want my bookie running into those. I want it to get shielded and then maybe value trade a unit on his board. And so after all that talk, I mean, I could put Ferrex position 1, but we also have to think about what our cleave protect is. Cleave protect is going to be very important. I highly suspect my opponent is going to lead position 1 cleave. How do I best deal with that? The reason why I suspect that is because he doesn't really have another good leading unit. He could lead Murgle, and then he makes his cleaves very vulnerable. He could lead Bumper, but he's not going to lead Bumper into my board, right? So he's going to lead cleave. How do I best deal with that? So by putting my taunt 7th, I need a cleave protect. Ferrex is just the obvious choice for a cleave protect, I think, because it can regain shield throughout the combat. I'm not going to cleave protect Rapscallion recruiter, although that wouldn't be a bad play to use this 4115 Rapscallion recruiter as cleave protect. I am okay with that too, but using either the Rapscallion or the Ferrex as cleave protect is definitely correct. When you're dealing with positioning these later turns, every unit should have a role. In this case, bookie, the role is to deal with the Taunted Belcher. Straight shot, the role is to maybe value trade a couple of units and remove Reborn from Murgles. Rapscallion recruiters is to proc the Ferrex, and also it's a really good counter to Murgle. The bookie is just stats, and stats are obviously good. And the Ferrex is to be in the backline protected and reset as many units as possible. I hope you guys found this video really useful. If you don't want to miss out on any future guides that I post, don't forget to subscribe. It doesn't really cost you anything. I also have other guides on extremely useful topics like direction and leveling and everything. Definitely watch those if you haven't. Anyways, bye.